about tables. Like we have lots of tables. So when to use which table and how exactly each table differs. So we'll understand those scenarios. So it's very important to understand which table to use for our scenario. So in the initial requirement, when we, someone briefs us, so at that time itself, we have to ask certain questions to determine the, kind of volume we expect. So based on the volume we expect, we have to decide it. So today I'm going to tell you the, the right table to choose and how do we identify which table to use in our application. So these all are like commonly used if you see any of the application forms, uh, fragments or dialogues, tables. So these are the common controls which we see 80% of the use cases. So without a table, I think almost 90% of the apps does not exist in SAP Fiori apps, right? So one quick comparison is SAP is one matrix. Okay, I had one URL. Let me open it. Okay, I think let me check this. I think this is URL. We can bookmark this. Okay, so this is very important one. So it almost gives us first-hand information on the key differences. This is very, very, I mean, important to understand about all about tables. So just say this, right? So what all different tables we have currently? So we have a responsive table, and this is like for M table. Like by default, whatever we choose is M table. So M control offers. Along with M table, we have something called grid table. We talked about grid like layout, etc. So this is different. So it uses grid table. In short, it's like Excel like capabilities if you need. If customers is expecting like they are already using Excel to like through mails etc. If they are doing some manual activities, so always they are using too many columns and the number of rows etc. are less than 1,000 as such. Like the data is like not too low and not too high. So medium scale scenarios, those cases grid table tend to be of preferred choice. So when you say M table, like in the tablet and mobile space, if the table you need it and the number of columns are less than 10, so you have to keep in mind this particular matrix which I'm talking right now. The simple scenario is like if you want on your in mobile device as well as tablet device, if you want to access the table, then go to choices sap.mtable, right? But what if the scenario is they are strictly confined, no, no, we are going to use this data only on a desktop, and because we want to have the number of columns could be, you know it can anywhere range between greater than 10, right? So nobody has put these boundaries, but they have some guidelines. In the guidelines, it differs slightly. But basic thumb rule is if more than 10 columns are there, we cannot actually fit them in mobile and tablet scenarios. Okay. So less than 10 only are like more control we can. And it doesn't mean that you cannot add 20, 30 columns. We can definitely add, but the performance, etc., would be greatly affected. That's the reason in mobile devices, you should always make sure that less than 10 columns alone, you should actually ideally go for it. So if you notice that, if you sense that when the customer has lots of columns to compare in the report, etc., then you should always recommend them to go for grid table, right? This is one of the basic thing which we do when we go for grid table. So this is like nothing but SAP dot. If you see the library SAP dot UI dot table. So this is what differs. So the library package itself differs. Okay. This it is only meant for desktop and not for mobiles. Clear. So most of the extensive reports would be built only for the mobile scenario. And in this case, rows could be up to 1,000, etc. So the up 1,000 rows, in the sense, the moment you load on the table, it can accommodate max to max around 1,000 rows. So maybe on the, you'll give some like Google, how we give it 1 to 100, etc. If you see, we give it this index, right? So we can 1,000 rows max you can accommodate, and next you can probably use an index, etc. Or you can scroll down and view 1,000 more. So this kind of pagination, etc., we can do, and we can handle grid table up to 1,000 rows, like max 1,000 rows if you're dealing with. Generally, in case of mobile, number of rows could be optimum case, generally 200 rows on the home screen as such. Okay. Initial load will give 200, and then 200, 200 we can increment as such. So you need to understand the volume of data you're going to handle, right? So there is third category. So what if we have very very huge volume, and we wanted to suggest a data. Suppose you are having lakhs of transactions in a month or in a quarter. In a quarter, you wanted to view lots of data. So it doesn't make sense to give if the data exceeds more than 1,000 rows, etc. And if you give that such a data, people cannot analyze the data at all. So it doesn't make sense if for such a huge volume to show in a table format. So what we go is we go with analytical table, which provides some charts or analytics. So it will try to drill down the data and it presents itself in a chart form so that they can take useful actions. Suppose in a quarter, if there's a lakhs of rows, does it make sense to make out of lakhs of rows? How do we actually drill through the data? So it doesn't make sense at all. So if the scenario is such a huge volume of data, if you are seeing it, like I'm giving very vague estimate, but generally in a quarter you might have maybe 20,000, 30,000, max 1 lakh data, rows of data maybe, but still it is a huge data where a common man cannot actually make out anything out of the data. So there could be lots of things going on. So how the sales got improved or sales got declined, etc., they have to take a call. Then those cases we prefer analytical table. Again, analytical table, if you notice SAP.UI, UI controls are all desktop controls. They are not meant for mobile. So as analytical table as well, we opt only if we need some charts and very huge volume data. Like I said, it could be, a simple thumb rule is, greater than 1,000 rows of information you're trying to present, etc. So it doesn't make sense to present it in a Excel form. So if a simple way to understand is Excel. Excel kind of capability is like if you open an Excel, most of the customers generally uh, they are at the Excel stage only. 80% of the cases what they ask is, sir, we are currently we just I need to ask, sir, if there is no existing scenario, sir, how is your business process currently, how you are actually handling the scenario? We need to ask this question. If they say that, sir, we use through mails, etc., to communicate, sir, so in the mail, in the sense, are you using any specific Excel or any other specific tool as such? So how exactly your data exchange, etc., goes around? So most of the people what they do is like if any technology they are using, they have the option to export to Excel or export as doc, PDF, etc. See, we need to understand if it's like a doc or etc. using document, Word doc, etc. If they're using it, we have to use upload features, etc. Okay, the same thing. If it is a Word or PDF, what we do is in the same table, we'll use one column which will have an upload option. So they can use a simple mobile as well, and we use an upload option. So doc, PDF alone, then a simple upload will do. Or if you have an Excel, we can even use grid table, we can use it, and upload option we can use, and they can upload the data directly using Excel, and we can read the data and we can show them as a tabular form. So if they are used to Excel, we can give them as is Excel as well, and both options we can provide simultaneously. So Excel plus UI, in directly in UI as well, they can enter the data. You're able to understand or relate, I mean, how the scenario would be and how we are trying to present in which control, etc.
Mm.
So general questions would be like most of the customers, they are because if they are coming to most of the data solutions would be like this way, right? If I take
Yeah.
some random template, I'm taking it, where they could have lots of transactions this way, right? So they
Mm.
they could be having lots of transactions out there, so there could be some data around. And usually they what they try to do is they try to filter it out, they use lookup tables, etc., and they'll try to filter out the data and they play around it, and they usually share these reports in the form of Excel. And there could be case where most of the Excel tools, Office tools are quite common in whatever business scenario you take it. So when it deals with huge data, they try to put in a small mail and they'll try to attach this particular file. So this is how any traditional, you take any technology, all they provide was these basic tools like either Word form, PDF form, or one or the other form. So bulk data means you'll have one of these scenarios in picture. But our idea is we are trying to minimize their problem. See, if they use this approach, if they have to track back, okay, what I have sent on January first quarter, which what is the sales report I have sent, they cannot look into their mail and they cannot actually compare or the simulate the analysis, etc. So these are the kind of problems they face when the data is huge. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to automate those things. First, you have a table, you have a report. What are you doing? You did 6 months back, 1 year back, 2 years back, 3 years back. Use UI. Fiori, using Fiori UI, what we try to do is we give you a simple, clean solution. You are comfortable with Excel. You use Excel itself. We'll give a simple upload option. You can continue using the same approach, but instead of sending through mail, you can upload the data in the application. And any point of time, if you want to use it, or you want to use the information or drill down the information, if you want to access the information, you can straight away simply access using Fiori application. And if you wanted to update the data straight away from the application itself, you can go and update yourself. So we can track information effectively using our scenarios, and for that the recommended solution is grid table. So if you sense some information that they are using Excel, etc., data, then straight away go for grid table. That is the most suited scenario for 80% of the customers. And mtable, you use it if they specifically ask for you that sir, we need in a point-to-point solution where on the go this data we need to access. If they specify anything of this sort, then mtable, then you should mention them, sir, is the volume way high? So if the volume is way high, etc., so what we have to say, we have to identify for the mobile space which fields are very key to them. Like if they insist that they need mobile, then we need to identify key fields. So in mobile space, we have to limit. In desktop space, we can show 15 to 20 columns, but in the mobile space, we have to restrict them to. We'll say that in mobile device, we'll not be able to see all the fields, but we'll show only the key fields. Key fields up to 5 to 6, we have to limit as such. So we have to reduce the number in order to improve the performance. So we cannot have very huge chunks of data and we cannot accommodate with limited screen space. Correct. So accordingly, we have to drive the scenario, and based on the scenario, we need to understand. And there is one more apart from response table, grid, and analytical table. So there is one more called tree table. Tree table, the use cases are very limited, and I'll show you. Um, so each of the example I'll show you so that you'll understand how each control looks. So this is SAP UI.tree table. So tree table is it looks this way, where you have an hierarchy kind of. So where you have to expand first row and further expansion of second rows. So and finally after expanding uh, three rows, then you can probably modify the data around it. Okay. So tree table scenarios are very limited, and it is not very, you cannot actually it's see end users, they cannot actually use this very effectively. We might be using them as expanding to the, if you see here, we had the document in section, so here we are using tree table only, but it doesn't look like a table, but ideally what we are using is tree table itself. Okay. So if you're able to relate, so we use it in a different way. I mean, it's not used in a tabular form, but it might be used in this. If you see here, it is nicely presented, right? So hierarchy. So when you have something in hierarchy, etc., so we can generally tend to use tree table. But I have
Mm.
seen a couple of scenarios. Yes, yes.
Oh, no, no, nothing.
Okay. So tree tables are, we have hierarchical pattern. So if you sense that the data has to be put in hierarchical fashion, then I think you can opt for tree table. But most important thing is the methods and the way we bind, with the way we declare are all different for all the four. Okay, so don't ever use the properties methods used for mtable to grid and grid to analytical, etc. So each of them you have to refer to API, and API suggests us which things to use. So because the binding changes, the kind of approaches, aggregations changes. So the within the sub attributes, etc. Completely everything changes. So this is a high level way of understanding. So I'll show you quick snapshot. Now we know how tree table looks. So let me show you analytical table as well. So there is one. So you might have seen here the table. So it appears as a chart. And if I click on this icon, it automatically appears as a table as well. So we can switch to tabular view, or we can switch to graph view. So this we call it as analytical table, where we have the flexibility to view the data in a more understandable way. So if you see huge volume data, they can simply make it out based on, okay. So I think these are the customers who are having higher sales. So these are the less used sales. So they could actually make out some information, key information in a quick view. If they wanted to further analyze, etc., they can always fall back to the tabular way, and they can further refine the data. So you're actually making their life easy. So they're able to take the insights in a quick fashion, and they can concentrate now, instead of they working on Hapatech, etc., where they are more interested in the top two customers. So Delmont Industries and Jolga, they can try to look into these two organizations, and they can further filter out data using the tabular approach. So this is how now, if they can clearly say that, okay, this Delmont is our key customer, and I think we have to prioritize the shipments or deliveries, etc., to this particular customer, etc. So we have analytical layout page as well. So there is one layout. So in I haven't I if you have noticed it, um, overview page analytical, I asked you to park it out. The reason being is we for this is the same reason. So we had so the, that uses even again analytical table itself. So inside this
Mm.
particular layout, if you use the wizard, so we have two approaches. One is through annotations, as well as other through freestyle scenario as well. So if you use such an approach, this is how we'll get it. So this is completely analytical page itself. The whole page template itself is analytical. But what we are talking is only about this particular table control. Okay,
Mm.
that's a whole template, and this is just a the table part. Clear?
Mm.
So this is how the analytical table looks, and you understood, right? Like just understand, like, okay, when you have huge volume of data, it makes sense to represent in charts. Then we have to go for analytical table. Okay.
Mm.
If there is an hierarchical information, I think it makes sense to use tree
Yeah.
structure. Okay. And if Excel like capabilities, then straight away all we need is grid table. They are not going to use very huge data. They just have limited data, and the data viewing in Excel form is fine, and Excel kind of operations etc is fine. Then we can go for grid table. So So this is if by default it says as table, that means it is grid table itself. SAP UI table dot table. So the control will not have a name called grid, but we call this as grid table because it has Excel kind of thing. So, but you have to just refer to UI or M. So that's the only difference for us to understand. So if you see, we can straight away edit the columns, etc. in the table. If you see, there are like lots of columns here. And one more parameter I was trying to mention. So yesterday I have discussed about contents densities, right? So grid table supports condensed as well. So they can shrink this particular table each row height as well. So you can accommodate like how Excel we can shrink to see this is like very much shrinked. So this we call it as condensed. So by default in M table, you'll have this much of space. It's like cozy mode. So you have huge space. So number of rows also will be accommodated less because in the touch devices, you need to accommodate your finger. Whereas in desktop, we need not to actually,
Mm.
ensure that that much of screen space is required for tapping, etc. Right? So we
Mm.
have condensed mode, which allows us to shrink further. Like you can minimize to smallest extent. So grid table, etc. supports condensed. So M table doesn't support, but UI table, UI controls, the SAP.UI library supports condensed as well. So we can use condensed to accommodate all the more. If customer expects more rows to be visible on the long, I mean opening screen of the table, you can by default it will be compact. You can make it to condensed so that extra few 10 more rows you can accommodate. Okay, so that is one nice trick we can use in case of grid tables. Okay, to accommodate more rows. And if you see, if you're entering, see now they can you can use in this case, if you see, we can use an upload option and they can directly upload the Excel and we can update the whole data, or we can ask them to enter update the records, individual records this way using a UI as well. So we can use both ways. So generally if you notice, like there are like too many rows, if they have to enter, it is always comfortable for them to enter in an Excel and just upload a file. Correct? So end users, they'll feel convenient if they have lots of records. It doesn't make sense to add each row, modify the row on the application as well. So you give a simple nice upload option where if they upload an option, we can update all the records as well. And likewise, if they want to download this data, if they want to send it to someone, we can give a nice export to Excel option, and they can send this data to anybody as well. So these all features we can give. And if you see, like I mentioned, I'll show you how it why we call it as Excel like. See, if you see here, if you click on it, we can sort based on ascending, descending. So which we most frequently use it. We have here, right? So ascending, descending, we can sort it out. So we are able to sort in Excel ascending, descending, and we are able to filter as well. So if you see filtering, etc., we filter it this way. We can search, etc. So samely in grid table, if you select here in each example, they have explained filtering. Now there they explain sorting, here they are explaining filtering. So we can filter out based on laptops are there, so then we can filter out laptops. Okay, so it will be filtered. So in order to clear it, we have to click here and just we have to clear it. Okay, there is a clear option as well, so we can filter the information as well. So this is one option we have, and we can have more detailed filtering, like based on categories you can select. So if it is simple filtering, we can do it that way, or we want to give it a nice UI and have it, so we can give this kind of filters as well, so all the data can be refined. And to reset it, we can simply click on the reset button. Okay, so this we call it as more detailed filtering, etc. And one more important option we'll have, this one. If you see, most, like we said, more columns if you have, in this case we can make it as 3. If you see here, the first 3 columns we can freeze them. And if people like, these are the key info fields. So if you know the table, out of all the fields, 20 to 30 columns, which are key fields, those fields on the left side you can make them always freezed, like fixed, and rest of the tables we can make them move, so that user can whenever they want to relate the data, they can relate those data. So not only the starting columns, if you want to have on the rows instead of columns, on the rows if you want to fix, we can fix the rows. So for top 3, like most important data, etc., we can always, the top 3 records we can actually try to control it. You're able to understand. So here we are able to freeze the first 3 records. The partition here denotes that we cannot actually, we can
Mm.
fix them and we can move the bottom records. These features are not available in mtable.
Mm.
This is a case where you can have to freeze only the bottom 3, so you can fix the bottom 3. In this case, all the top records will be moving, but bottom 3 will be fixed. So these kind of fixed layout scenarios will be more common when you have 20-30 columns. If you have 20-30 columns, we can, even in desktop also, because of screen limitation, some columns might be overflowing outside. In this case, if you see, till supplier we are able to show the columns, and beyond details it got overflowed in the sense you have to scroll down, right? People may not be able to compare the data if you are scrolling every now and then, if they are scrolling it. So in this case, it makes sense to freeze the most important columns, and they can move around the data, so that you have your key fields available and you can just scroll through the other data, right?
Yes.
So this feature really important when you have too many columns. So this always outweighs, when there are 20-30 columns, this feature will outweigh other um, features in general. Okay, so this is one. I mean, now if we are trying to understand why we are calling it Excel, like, because it has sorting, it has filtering, and it has fixed freeze, etc. These features, additional features, will be available. Okay, and one more. And there are like lots of other features where we can, from the API you can come to know. Yeah, one more feature is you can shrink the columns. Like in Excel, what we do is we'll be able to play around. If your data is too huge, suppose there's a description column where you're not able to make out, so we tend to rearrange. But in mtable, we cannot rearrange the columns; they will be fixed. And there you will not have these grids as well. So if you see here, there is like some grids, like there are lines, etc. Like Excel, you have the lines, etc. So here in Excel we have the lines, etc. Like as a grid, it shows that it's a grid. So that's the reason why it is called as grid, because grid table, because it has grids which allow us to distinguish the data. In M table, let me show you M table so that you'll understand. Most mistake what we then generally do is, even I have done this mistake in couple of times, then I realize it in a hard way. That's why I'm emphasizing more, because I started with M table. The problem was customers are also, they're not sure of how many data volume they expect. Okay, if something a new project altogether, so it's always good go with UI table, because I for one of the project I had gone for M table. And as the phases, first phase, they had very limited data and they had very limited columns. But as after 6 months down the line, they had added all of a sudden 10-12 columns, and they said these are really important. For everything they say it's very really important, but they don't understand, the design. Now if design you cannot change in between. See, design you have to stick from beginning. And they say the volume is expected volume is, it got doubled, and we have to design it very carefully. So we cannot actually, see if the performance affects, people simply discard that application. No, this doesn't solution doesn't work for us. They simply say it doesn't work for us. They don't understand why it doesn't work. See, if you scale up, it should be scalable. So if you sense that there is, there is going to be huge volume, then always use grid table, because it's a middle ground. You need not to go for analytical, or you need not to go for this, because that is a drastic shift. I don't think it will happen. People today, they won't ask charts and suddenly we want charts, etc. So those cases will not happen. But definitely the AM table can be promisingly extend to grid table. So always stick to grid table if you sense there are like huge volume of data involved. Okay.
Mm.
So because M table cannot be changed with your table, nothing. It doesn't work that way. So M table has its limitations, and we cannot scale it, beyond certain volume.
Mm.
So M table, they call it as responsive table. So if you see as responsive table, this is nothing but M table itself. So there are like more details you can comparisons you can check in this guidelines as well. So this will take you to guidelines, and if you see here, if you see, it has only a rows partition but not the grids. If you see, we have a grids here, and each of these columns can be adjusted, whereas in case of here there is no columns partitions. We cannot readjust the column spaces. Okay. So whatever width we are setting it, either in the control itself, we have to set to auto. There is a width auto property, will automatically, based on the data, it will automatically, so largest row whichever has highest length of data, for all the rows it adapts to that particular width. And fixed width also we can specify. So this is how one of the distinguishing feature between M and grid. Okay, and these are the major in general features. There are like many other features, but these are the things which we have to remember in identifying which table to be. Now I think they have given some more properties. Quickly I'll will just try to understand. See, they'll indicate whether this can be used control on desktop, tablet, and phone. For if you see here, they say response table can be used in all the three devices, green. But grid table you can use on tablet, but on phone you cannot use it. So this is how. So general thumb rule is this used for only desktop. So there are like not many use cases where they ask you only for tablet, etc. Okay, so ensure that you this is like meant for desktop. So tablets nowadays they come with equal form factor like desktop. So pretty much we can have it. So if you see here, it is in phone, it is not supported in phone. All the three tables are not supported. Similarly, hiding column, pop-in behavior, etc. So say automatically based on the device in M table we can hide columns, etc. I'll show you in the demonstration how we'll do it. We'll use a table control, then we'll see how this response, so automatically how it gets hides a certain fields, like we have seen yesterday using CSS class. One of the property only desktop SAP UI only desktop, if we use on the desktop we can show certain columns, and we can hide, right? So there is like automatic control flow as well. We have certain controls we have in M table, using which if it automatically understand that it is a mobile device, and it automatically hides those columns. So if based on the device, it automatically handles which columns to show and which columns not to show. We have a priority option as well, high, medium, low. If you set to high, those will be always shown even in the mobile device. If you set the priority as low, those columns will be automatically hidden based on the available screen space. So device features based on that, they'll understand. So such features are not available in any of these other tables because they are meant for desktop. Like I said, compact, condensed, quasi, these are the default mm, what we call the density. So the amount of buttons, etc., visibility factor or the touch factor depends on. By default, M tables comes with quasi, and we can set to compact to have more screen space. But condense is not supported in M table, and while condense is supported in all other UI controls, so it's completely supported across UI table controls. I think there is like I think there is one specific feature called summarized maybe it's specific to analytical table. I'm not sure of what exactly summarized cell, but I think it's a specific feature meant for analytical table, and it's not available in other tables. And hierarchical data we know, so only tree table supports hierarchical data, so they have specified hierarchical data. Grouping etc are like there's one feature, I'll show you that feature as well. So we can group the data based on certain information. And freezing columns we have seen just now, like grid table supports. Likewise, even tree and analytical supports freezing of columns, whereas it's not available in M table. Horizontal scrolling we don't have in this is why again a big blue, I haven't mentioned it. The problem is horizontal scrolling. If you see, by default table will not have horizontal scroll. You might have seen this example, M table. This again a big drawback in M table. I think I hope they have to provide. Even now they haven't fixed it. This is really a big problem because I have faced. So response table, what it tends to do is you have the vertical scroll, okay, but you will not have the horizontal scroll for the M table. Okay, so even though you can add 10 20 columns, so the main objective is they do not want the user us to use M table with too many columns. That's the reason. See how much our screen space is available. Only those many columns we have to display. That's the reason they haven't given horizontal scrolling. Okay, they forcefully removed that particular feature called horizontal scrolling. You're able to understand, because if the screen it can accommodate only 8 columns, beyond 8 columns they are insisting us not to give at all. But there is a way. So we have something called horizontal scroll. This is a separate control. We have to scroll container, we call it. Using scroll container, we can provide it. These all things may not sense you. I mean, tick to your boxes now. But if you are forced to, for you have used M table and you are forced to add couple of columns, and you have to ensure that performance least affected. Like I said, up to 8 columns, but you added some 2 3 columns extra. Then to view them we need a scroll, right? So you cannot say that a scroll doesn't exist and those columns will not appear, right? So for that we have something called scroll container. That's a workaround kind of. So scroll container we can use, and so using scroll container we can add any type of scrolls, horizontal, vertical, etc. If you see here, this is vertical, whereas this is horizontal. So we can put a scroll container as our container, and within the container we can place our M table control. Then we can get this particular scrolling behavior. So this we can control. Only horizontal scroll we can enable, vertical we can disable, etc. Okay. And one more, merging duplicates. Yeah, there is one feature called merging duplicates. So I'll show in demo in Mtable how it works. So merging duplicates, I think you can straight away see as well. I think in when we are coding, I'll just show you how we can merge the controls. It is not available in other features. And yeah, this is one more, again one more feature, supported controls. What all controls are supported? We have something called micro charts. So micro charts are I think I'm not sure if I have mentioned anytime.
Yeah, you.
So there's a library called data visualization, and there's one nice one. This will micro charts in table. So in M table, if you see this in M table, we can use these all nice charts along with our data. So these
Mm.
all are available microcharts. Like this we call it as radial chart. This we call it as some bullet chart, and this as comparison chart, delta chart. So they gave a different names altogether, but altogether all these microcharts are put in a single table. So if you want to have some these kind of miniature charts within the table cell, then we can use these charts. Okay, but only M table supports, and rest of them do not support. They have very limited set of support. Like if you see, supports all kinds of controls inside a line item. When they say inside a line item, most likely they are referring to these microcharts. Okay, because they add value add to our table, whereas these kind of they support only one. See what all they support is inside: text, label, object status, icon, button, date picker, combo box, so rating indicator, progress indicator. Only these kind of, and there are like only three charts, small size, like stacked bar chart, micro comparison, and bullet chart. Only these three charts they support. Okay, not all charts. So this microcharts within microcharts, these three microcharts are supported in all these three. If you see one, they have mentioned one, one, one. Okay. So these three, they support only these kind of set of controls. This is very important to understand. If you wanted to have some kind of minimalistic graphical touch to your controls, then you have to make sure that only these controls you can use it in grid table, etc. Don't use all the controls, whereas in M table it supports all the controls. So whatever control in 850 controls you have which are in M library, you are free to place them in inside your table. So those are like very rich features, if you ask me, right? Rich features in the sense, very limited use cases we'll get, where customer might be asking us to, can we show some image as well, where product image, and if you want to see, then if you see, icon is the one which we need to have. Icon is nothing but our image. So image we can add. So icon, if it supports, icon currently everything supports, so we can assure that yes sir, we can add some image property, and we can show the product directly, image right next to it. But if there are certain features where you cannot accommodate, then we have to see whether we have those control support or not. Okay. So maximum date, upload feature, etc. So for those things we can use these kind of controls. And here if you see, they clearly they're trying to articulate, to optimize performance, we recommend you to show no more than 200 items at once in a responsive table. So this is what I was trying to emphasize. So here, less than 200 rows of data. So if you have 200 items on the initial page, when you're loading, in this case table, if you see, there are like hardly some 20, 30, like max 200. More than 200, it doesn't mean that you cannot show. You can show, but the performance will be affected. So that's what they are trying to emphasize on. See, they call it as responsive table or M table, all are the same. And for larger items up to 1000, use growing feature to limit the number of display data. Make sure user can filter data. So they're saying to use growing feature, and the pagination what I showed, right? So we can use pagination, etc. Uh, to show further records. We can accommodate all the data, but at single shot, do not show more than 200. So that is the whole idea of it. I think there are like some more details they have mentioned. See, the limits mentioned are only recommendations. Okay, so they clearly say, see, these are not like you cannot do beyond that, or we can always show more than 300. You can always add any other data, etc. Okay, so the actual limits depend on the scenario, like the number of rows in the table, number of columns that are visible, complex cell browser being used, etc. Okay, okay, these all, I think now you got a gist of which table to ask. There is one more table called smart table. Okay, so this we will not use for programmatic reason. This is once it was used, now it's not being used. Okay, I'll tell you why, and so what's the difference between smart table. If you see here, we use for freestyle development, etc. This one, the Fury elements uses smart table control. It's like uh, based on metadata, automatically the table, etc. will be generated. So how does it look? So previously we used, the SAP has 2 years back, it has focused on smart tables and smart controls, and now they have stopped them for freestyle development. So they are not going to support any further. So what the objective was it? In case of wizard, etc. So you have metadata. So automatically the columns, etc. How they are getting rendered is, um, smart table requires only metadata file. So metadata file, right? So we have for the OData service, any URL, if you type dollar $metadata, so dollar $metadata, if we type, so it gives us what all entities are existing in that particular service, and what are the key fields, which is the key field in this case. and name, address, business partner ID, etc. are the columns or the fields. So based on these fields, so if you have a metadata, you know what all columns needs to be populated, etc. So if you have a metadata, then using smart table, automatically this whole filters, etc. table can be designed. This whole sorting, etc. by default, automatically, programmatically they can generate. So you have fixed information required, and if you check this code, there is will be no UI coding at all. Directly there will be simple tag called table. If you see smart table, so if you see here, there's only properties, there is no columns, nothing, etc. You cannot write a single line of code. It is automatically, it fetches based on metadata, it fetches everything. All you specify is which item set to use. So in this case, line item set is set. So if you say business partner, then all the fields in business partner it uses, and it automatically generates the table. So you have to specify which entity to use and entity set, and accordingly. So the above part, if you see, these all are like smart filter bars, the filter controls which you had. So here, the above you had this filters, right? So here to add which all filters you need it. So all the top such filters are added using this particular line of code. So this is not meant for us, it is meant for smart templates, the wizards which we are using it. In this wizards, if you use any wizard, so it generates based on the smart table control itself. The behind the scene, it uses metadata's information, and it automatically generates a table control. So in order to automatically generate a code, how the feature elements work is, they work based on smart table control itself. So this is, we don't use it for our regular development, because you cannot code anything, you cannot modify the columns, you cannot make any changes. So smart table is not useful for developers. It is only meant for wizards and templates. Clear? So these are the available tables. I think I had lots of theory today, and we'll try to do an exercise. I'll start with some simple exercises. We'll start with M table, followed by other tables, etc. I'll walk through all the tables. We'll do all the exercises on all the tables, and then let's for starting now. So theory is over. So that's very important, because your whole application is dependent on your one call. If you wrongly used one wrong table, and you haven't asked the volume of the data, how they are using it, you need not ask, sir, how many rows you will have, because a business may not know how many volume of data at the start of the application. Maybe we can ask, sir, how you used to work so far, like through mails, how you do you share using documents, Excel, etc., or how exactly you used to share the data prior to building the solution, some custom solution. So you will get some hints from them. Yes, I think we used to use some portal to hold all our place or documents, and in the mail we used to share the URL, etc. Then we make a sense, okay, in the portals, are what all file formats you follow. So are you following only Excel data, or are you following any other documents? So we'll get to know what all features we have to build, so that to support their as is. So we have to complement their existing way of working. We cannot actually say them that you stop using the way you are working, and you have to use only our Fiori application to do your work going forward. So that will be a bottleneck. People always expect some complementary features, not to stop their existing way of working. If they're
Okay.
comfortable using existing way, we have to let them use the way, and we have to show them that, sir, this is how we can help this our solution to simplify your existing problem statement. So if you're comfortable, you please continue using that as well. And whenever you want to analyze some data, you can fall back to this particular application, where instead of going through the folder structure in the portal, in the January, what are the sales report, etc., so you can straight away come here, you can look at your data, and you can take a call whether sales report, you want to what are data you want to have, etc. So we'll see practically, then we'll talk more. Let's not talk any more theory. So now I came to response table. Now first factor is, now we wanted to build one nice application. So let me start with, so first let me close others. So we'll create a new folder. We'll create this is my M table. I'll call it as response table. So I'll select this folder. So we'll shall take application generator. So always make sure you have single application folder in your to avoid conflicts. So I created a new folder, and then so we have to make a call here. So okay, now we understood all the query elements. Now you just tell me the wizard how exactly works, etc. You are able to make out. So if you, now you understood how this list report is generated in the table. See, it uses smart table behind the scene. So using wizard, it is able to, because we are selecting some OData service in the wizard, and the OData service has a metadata, and using the metadata, smart table is able to read the metadata, and it's able to, you select which entity to use as a table, and automatically it understands and it maps programmatically and uses smart table. So the how the query element works is it works based on smart table. Now you understood, right? How this all tables are being generated. So no code will be generated, automatically. There should be some library behind it. So the library behind these tables is smart table, right? Now we'll go into select freestyle, because that's the way we can. Now if you select straight away any of this, they use mtable itself, or if you wanted to add manually, we can use UI application as well. For a case of simplicity, you can select this list report. First, understand easiest way, then I'll complicate it the M table as well. So gradually I'll try to complicate it, and I'll try to show you complex scenarios as well. So easiest way to use M table is take any service you can take. It doesn't have to be uh, any particular service. So we have defined, we have taken list report, and we are mapping it to one service now. So this is the easiest way to replicate a M table scenario. And I'll select business partner set, business partner ID. I'll select some company name. So object number, there is no object number, none. Okay, I can leave it. So here, if you have to understand, we have to study the layouts, and then where the layout, what we call it as object collection, what we call it object key. Object collection is nothing but the entity set, and the key field in the object set, we call it as object collection key. Okay, if you have seen the metadata, so this is our object collection is nothing but our entity. So this we call it as entity, and the key field in it is in this case, if you see, the key field is property is business partner ID. So using key field itself, always make sure you are selecting the right key field, because key field alone allows us to navigate to this particular navigation properties. So in this case, navigation properties are nothing but the drill down data, the second level of data, the third level of data. So always in order to drill down data, we need a key field. So ensure that you are not selecting the wrong field. Always you have to select the right collection, and the collection, you have to make sure that you're selecting the right key. So here the names they might be using different. The object collection is nothing but entity set, and object collection key is nothing but our primary key of that particular entity set. So in this case, the entity set has primary key called business partner ID, so I have selected business partner ID, right? And object id is further on the detail page, or sub navigation page. So you drill down to one layer, right? So if the list report, if you take, I think I'll show you an example. So but just remember object id. So table it generated on row, if you click, you'll navigate to sub page, right? So in the sub page, whatever we show on the header, that we call it as object id. So in this case, object id would be company, and then object number, the corresponding fields for this object id would be object number, unit of measure, etc. So company doesn't have those. You select some address or something. I think for currency, etc. you might have. So if you want to have further fields like currency, etc., maybe even this doesn't have currency, price, web address. Okay, maybe this field doesn't have any other. So fine. So just remember this. I'll just show you after generating this. I'll just show you where this falls. So this is the key field, entity set, and the key field. So object ID will be second drill down property fields. So what are the second drop down values? We'll come to know in a shortly. I'll name it as response table. No features. UK UX. Give it as a namespace. Make sure to give it as constant. You can leave all rest of the things as is. Just click on finish. See, one important takeaway from this is if we can have four applications which uses response table, grid table, analytical table, tree table, etc. We have to practice all the methods, etc. Like playground, what all activities. Generally, what we do the CRUD operations like updating the table, deleting the table, adding a record, etc. So if you practice these CRUD operations on these four scenarios, that will be your fallback solution. So if you have to implement any large scale project, so table control CRUD operations, if you mastered, that means the core of the application, this is the UF application, the core of the application is table control.
Yeah.
Because we massive data we are trying to present it in a nice and easy way in on the screen. So the you forget about all the controls. Those are like they have minimalistic impact. If you remove certain feature, nobody is going to ask you. But if you remove the table altogether, it's a big deal in the application. So if you do not practice anything also, but make sure you practice this table exercises, because there's very huge important associated with it. Because you understand properly, then you can take a call at the start of the application itself. We have to take a call which table to use, and afterwards there's no looking back. So if you have taken a mistake, you have to deal with it, so
Mm.
till the end of the project, because you have to uh, use your all your skills to make it performance oriented as well as to accommodate what our client asks. So make your call right at the beginning of the stage. And now it got generated, so just I'll try to run this case. In this case, let's see, first of all, there's no issues at all. I think it's taking a while. Okay, so in this week, at least we should be able to concentrate all on. We'll set a target. Coming week, we'll try to do a full scale project. I'll share a use case, and then we'll try to cover all the essential concepts which are necessary for building a huge full scale application. So we'll start
Okay.
working on full scale application, but
Yeah.
now we'll try to learn all the concepts which are needed for building a full scale project, etc. So I think now our M table got generated. Maybe you can ignore the field bindings because we can select the appropriate. Now, if the one which you see, the key field, this is the key field which we selected. This is what I'm talking about, object ID. This is object ID. So we have drill down. This is a second level of data drill down. So on the row, when you click it, that's what the template wizard was asking us, object ID. So the object ID is nothing but whatever we selected was this. So it does not have other fields like measure, number, etc. So we selected none, so nothing got populated. So this basic skeleton, etc., using template we are able to generate. That uh, behind the scenes, now let's see the code. This is an M table, so pretty much M table where you had couple of columns, etc. So let's see. So you can play around with all the features of M table. So here we have M table library, and this is how the table structure has been added. So items is a one where we'll change. If you want to change to any different entity set, you can directly change to entity set. And by default, which sorting you want to do, descending, ascending, etc., company name. So a template automatically generated, and all you have to do is, if you do not want this data, you can very well, in your OData service, go check $formatically.json, check which our entity set is meaningful to you, so you can explore this entity set. So one way to do is, I said, you make use of Postman, etc. So they'll give you more handy tools. So for the project, I'll show you how we'll use, etc. But right now, browser alone is sufficient. So you can install, if you haven't yet installed this particular Postman service, where for the CRUD operations we'll practice, we'll test the scenarios in Postman, and then we'll try to write the logic for the CRUD operations, etc. So it's recommended to have that plugin available. Now, right now we can use just a browser itself. So now business partner set, if I see, so if currently we map it, so we can further extend the application with all these fields, right? We have lots of, if you see, there's a navigation called to sales order. So if you want to access to sales order, this is how we have to access. So it says business partner entity set followed by key. So the key we have selected, right? So we have the key. So key, if you pass, then if you use this particular binding approach, so you can go to sales order, and you can view all the sales order data. If you still, there are like lots of data for the sales order. So for this particular business partner, maybe you can consider as one supplier, and so the supplier has lots of orders. From the supplier, we have lots of orders. You see all these orders. If you see, there are like lots of orders out there. So each order details, if you want to see, also we can look around it. So this is how, first of all, we'll look at the data first. So we'll try to understand uh, which way we have. First of all, designing this model itself is a very right. We have to do things right at the two ends. One, at the back end level, when we are trying to start building our application, we have to make sure that customer in the requirements scenario, what are fields they're expecting. Suppose they're expecting date, merchant, category, etc. So when we are building it, we have to make sure that we are having the right entity set. So we cannot have a few fields in one entity set and few fields in another entity set. Our table works with only one entity set, right? So either there are like two approaches of ensuring that all the fields, required fields, are available in the entity set. One, you create a view, CDS view, or you can create a, you can ask the team to give a single entity set consisting of all the fields. Then they can give you business partner set. In this case, we have dollar format. So in this case, in the business partner set itself, you can have all the fields. So in this case, you can directly bind the business partner entity set, and you can map all the fields. So your table will have all the fields, right? So what if there is a case where you have only three fields and you do not have the amount field, right? So
Yeah.
how do we deal with it? So then, if the backend, what they say is, yes, we have it, but that's another table. For the table to fetch the records, we need a key field. So what user has selected in this case? Chain as a key field they have selected. So what we are saying is, okay, fine. So in this case, the key field, using, I'll pass you the key field, and can you get me the details? In this case, maybe he will say sales order. Okay, sales order will pass a key. Then we can have to fetch those fields, and then we can map the fields as well. So I'll, now in this case, we know that there's a amount field. So amount field is available in by navigating to it. So can we map it to our main table? Yes, definitely yes. But is it straightforward? No. So how do we deal with this scenario? You're getting right. So we have mapped one entity set, but those entity set fields does not exist. It has a
Mm,
navigation. So
mm,
they'll say that we have established a one to n relationship, where one ID will have n and sales orders, and you have to map those fields. So in this case, we use something called expanded entities. So when they say deep entity, when the backend, when they design it, they call it as deep entity. Deep entity is nothing but it's not available on the first level. It is available in the nested level. Nested level in the sense, further drill down. We are drilling down to one more layer, right? We are passing some key field, then you are fetching the data. That means there are like two tables. The other table, in order to read the data, we have to pass a key field. So unless you pass a key field, you cannot fetch those fields or columns of the second table. So how do we use the both fields? So I'll show you now. So I have business partner set, right? So now we have to fall back to our odata.org. So this is a place where I have mentioned once that you have something called OData URI conventions. So you can search for OData filter queries, dollar filter queries, etc. It will take you to this particular section. So you can check for dollar expand. So here they'll tell you like how to use, etc. So there are like different cases in entity sets as well. Okay, I'll not complicate now. For now, I'll tell you the basic scenario. Then during project phase, I'll just explain you the different kinds of drill down scenarios we face. So they're like very complicated scenarios are there, and it's not very practical to discuss at the start of the session. So simple way is, now you want to expand to a sales order set. So they're saying your main set expand equal to products. So in your case, you have to set as sales order set, right?
Mm.
So we'll use just this simple syntax. So let's see. So have business partner set. What they said, question dollar expand equal to, what is our set name? So we had the set name as two sales order, right? So this is a
Mm.
navigation. So what I'll do is I'll simply this is, I think this step. Okay, I'll set it this way. Just notice the difference.
Mm. Wow.
I think there's
So
like use
great.
data. So it's like deep entity now. So we are having both the data at single shot. It is fetching is. Okay, I think you will not be able to visualize the data here. I think let it load. I think they're like huge data because it's getting replicated, etc. So that
Mm.
has huge records. So it's trying to fetch both main table as well as second table, both table data. It's trying to combine it and it's trying to show us in a single shot. For this, in order to visualize certain data, we have to fall back to our Postman. So Postman will be able to, you know, present very huge data in a very better way. So browser can show only to some extent. I think okay, it's already launched. Sorry. So get request. Okay. So the username password we have to just enter it. So for the OData service has access, right? So you can go to authorization tab and you can select basic authorization, and we can define our user ID password. It's just like in the browser how we are doing it. We are just doing it here. This is very huge data, so it's I should have taken some other interest which is very short. But idea is we should be able to see the both the data. So if we are able to see etc., then we can actually try to understand. Okay, this is how two levels of data we can at single shot we can have it, and we can try to map it. But always you have to make sure that the performance affects. So if you're trying to two levels, three levels, now that's the same thing. So I said a little complicated. What are the complications? Like you have, what if we have the second level has further level, that is three levels you have data. So when you have to pull out three levels of data on your main table, So that's how the syntax, other syntaxes will come into picture. The data org. So this is, it says, um, products intern has suppliers, and maybe there are like two cases. Products can have, you pass a key field, then you get supplier. One more scenario is products has a navigation, just like how we had navigation for categories. So I think I'll show you later. Let me not confuse now. So they're like, we'll get a two levels, three levels data. Within the two level, we might have sub navigation. There would be like many other combinations we'll have. So we should be very careful at extracting the two level data and third level data. So that is very key for us for improving the performance. Yes, finally it loaded. If you see here, I'll use JSON. I think it's allowing. I should not have selected. It's rendering. It's taking time.
When we expand, there is a lot of data in the back end, huh?
Yes, yes, yes. So if you make any change, it's trying to hit the server and it's trying to get the response. Okay, that's the reason it's taking that much of uh, load time. I think guys, even I haven't used Postman for in a while, so it's if we are using it, it will be better. If you see here, uh, you have to notice it carefully. So you have the details of here. You have sales order fields as well as business partner fields. Okay, this you can better visualize it. Okay, so it will load it. So I'll tell you, the you can try as well. So you will be able to see these fields as well as below fields as well. Both fields at single shot it will be loaded, and all the fields we can see in the payload. Say here, if it says as deferred, that means any columns if you use, the data will not be fetched. Okay, if you have to bind the fields in sales order, in the contacts, products, all the fields, then you have to expand all the layers, and all the expanded layers, if you are able to visualize it here, then you are able to map it, visualize it from the table control as well. So that is a simple funda. So if you are able to view the data by calling this particular url, then you can map them in the UI application as well. Now we are not able to view the data fields of sales order, that means we cannot map them, right? So because the container does not have, so this is how our OData model, see when I say container, OData model or JSON model will have the data in similar way. So whatever you're able to see, the same thing even the container has. If it doesn't have in this file, if the file which we are reading it, if it doesn't have, you are not able to see data, then very much you cannot extract the data from the model as well. So you have to use a dollar expand, and you have to expand the second level and third level data. When you're able to visualize it, then you can map those fields. And similarly, you have to replicate, you have to set your property in the application here as dollar expand equal to sales order set, etc. You have to expand this entity in the path, then you will be able to bind those fields. Got it? How do we map now second level, third level data? So I'll not map it, it will be very bulky now. So first we'll practice mtable features, then I'll complicate further. Now if you see here, see this is how output. So address, we had address field, and the corresponding sales order also it got expanded. We are able to see sales order information as well. So here if you say it got as deferred, whereas in our postman we are able to see the data of both what do you call, the business partner ID set as well as sales order set, right? You're able to see, right, sales order set. So we are able to visualize it. Now we will be able to map as well. So we have to, all we have to use is this query in our UI as well. So how do we use it? Business partner expand. So we have to specify it here. See, see, make sure if we are using this, it will take, it will hit your performance. Okay. So I can remove this. This is not required. Only for visualization, I just added that. So this is how we have to maintain it. Now, second level data, third level data fields, we can map it. So let's map one or the other field. Now, right now we have only basic, what we have. Where is our application? I think somewhere. Okay, here we are. So we have only company name. Now, what I'll try to do is, so company name is there. Now I'll try to add two fields from this set and two fields from our sales order set. So let me add email address, or if not phone number, etc. So first we'll go, see again, here I haven't explained much, but table control has one aggregation. Okay, so what are aggregations, etc. I think I'll explain tomorrow. Um, but you have header here. So there is this, we call it as aggregation. That means nested control. A table has multiple aggregations, and we have something called columns aggregation. So here we'll define all our columns. And after defining all our columns, we have something called items. Items are nothing but the rows. So the column, each columns, the text which are defining, the label, so we'll define it here, and the data elements will define it here. If you see here, we have company name, etc. Right? Those are columns. So column headers. So column headers will define under columns aggregation. So column aggregation. Now, if you want to add one more column, all we have to do is we have to, just add a column tag. So I'm just copy pasting it for the case of simplicity. So here we'll have to follow some conventions we have to follow. So camel case we have to follow. Now we are trying to add, what we are trying to add, we are trying to add phone number. So I'll copy phone number. And ID always, just simple thumb rule, start with ID as a keyword, and whatever field name you have it, try to use it in a camel case. The camel case, when I say your starting letter should be capital, and your second word like phone number and should be capital. If you're defining data elements also, always, most of the people, they don't create proper data elements in SAP backend. That leads to lots of other problems. So make sure you define your name, I mean the fields, properly. If you use mixed cases, etc., there are chances that the same company name could be available in sales order as well. Okay, and in those cases, binding will be messed up. You'll find it hard time in UI while designing screens, etc. So always make sure you give, camel case approach, be it in the back end or the front end or anywhere. So this is the best approach to follow. And for IDs, you follow ID as a prefix and use the camel case. Now when you're saying text field, now for the column we can put text, etc. And all the static text. Now in this case, static text, when I say column name, etc. So best practice is whenever you're defining any static headers, etc. So you know that this can be used in any language. So by default, inbuilt to enable I18, what we do is, now in this case, I'll try to uh, simple name would be, I'll give as phone number. And again, this is my, so this is column name. So I'll just put a word called column, and then again my camel case. So this I'll follow for ID unique. For everything you have to define a unique ID. So in this case I'll define this way. And what we have to do, this phone number we have to maintain in our I18 for translation purpose. So existing whatever are there standard which template generated, keep it as it is. Here in I18 it's very you need not these are like, don't worry about the text which it shows. All you need to do is key value pair. So here it says phone number. So you have to define what are the name you want to call. So this can be anything, but the right whatever you're displaying, that will be displayed on your number. In this case, for phone number, I can call it as contact. Okay. So I18, it will refer to it and it will show as contact in our column name. Okay. So now I added column, right? I'll try to add multiple columns similar. So this is I'm trying to tell you best practice alongside. That's the reason. So I'll add one more called gross amount. So I think I'll pick it for one more from here itself. I'll take we'll take date. Let's take date. We use it for some other purpose as well. So I'll say as, so in this case ID should be, I have to use ID, created it, and then for the text I have to call it as, it is a column name, so I'll say as column and created it. And here I'll use it, created it, and in I18 I'll define. Great. So the left side names could be technical names, but what we try to define is, if you anytime if customer asks us to change, no, we want to a better naming or some other naming. So we need not to go and into the code. We can directly update the single file here, and we can translate the single file into multiple languages in German, French, etc. Now all we have to replace is single file. So our application will not be changing at all. Only the single file will be changing. So we need not to touch because all these are already defined. So this will be fixed. All we have to change on the right side value. So I can say um, start date or something, or whatever name created it, or you can call it as created on, etc. Or start date, whatever you wanted to call, we can define it. Now, from the main, I have taken two. Now I'll take from the two sales order two more fields. So here I'll take customer ID. I think we're crossed the time. Sorry, just I think I'll just try to show this, then tomorrow we'll catch up. So there's more to features to explore for M table itself, and I think we'll do it. So customer ID, and now again we'll just add it here. So this I'm trying to see like so this is how we have to define it when we are working itself, so that as we evolve the project, we need not to come back and just if we can define the directly text as well here. You can, instead of this, I can say it a customer ID. But the problem is at the end of the project, again you have to find all these text elements, and then again you have to starting text, you have to place it them here, and then you have to do. So do not go for those practices. Generally, every generally what they do is they start writing all the text comfortably, and then they later at last they'll try to change this text, but that leads to some other problems where frequent changes of, if they ask to change the text etc frequently in between the project, so you'll struggle to find the text in the long list of code, because as it is evolving you'll have lots of code, you'll start adding it. It will become very messy to find out each label and then changing it. When you're starting to build itself, try to add all the static elements in the i18 file, so that whenever you have to change any names etc, you can just fall back to this one single file and you can make all your corrections. You need not to touch the code at all. And even ideas, if you when you are working on this ID, if I have to fetch this data from controller, I need not to come and view it. So if I have to say this particular column, I know that ID of the column will be ID followed by field name. And similarly, if I have to get the value of text, I'll know from that it is column, so column followed by field name. So we can easily identify those fields, because we are following throughout the application one proper naming convention. So if it says a column name, so text field, if you have to have column dot company name would be my field. To field the header name, so all I need is id dot column name. You're able to relate, right? So this is how we'll define now. So for the mappings, related mapping bindings, we have to define it here. So I'll define it a simple attribute, text attribute. It's done almost, just a couple of lines more text. So we have defined four, so four columns, two from main set and other two from here. And then we can, I'm using a simple text attribute to bind the fields. So phone number, created it. You can extend it further to all the columns. Whatever columns you have it, you can in your access, you can do that. Then we have selected customer ID from here. So I'll map customer ID, and then so then afterward, I think we cross amount, I suppose. Okay, I haven't added another field. Okay, only customer ID I have added. Maybe I'll add one more called cost amount. I can say it instead of gross amount, I can call it as total amount. Okay. So now we have defined it here. We mapped here. So we added two fields from there and two fields from here. And then let me remove this last column. It doesn't make sense. Empty. So there's no field mapped to it. So it's simply just I'm trying to remove. So we got a couple of corrections. So I think these fields we got still the nested elements haven't yet appeared. We'll have to make a correction. Company name. So I18 company name, it doesn't have this one. And this I'll call it as list. Okay, we'll continue this exercise tomorrow. So we try to map the fields. So we got an M table where we have mapped this few fields from here and a few fields from sales order. So we'll try to change the bindings etc. in tomorrow's class, and we'll match it out. And now